Hey there guys, what's going on? So it's review time once again, but today we're going to be changing up our style of format in order to accommodate some more compact opinions, include a few more artists instead of just our standard single player feature, and make something a bit longer but a little more on the side of fluid. At least that's how I'm hoping it turns out anyway. In this installment, we're going to talk about a couple of artists who share at least a few commonalities across their respective genres, but in the midst of that, we're going to shove in a duo that brings something entirely different to the table. It's not only going to be a first for this channel, but a first for me as your friendly music reviewer here. It represents what I hope is some new growth for what I offer all of my viewers on this channel, as well as some growth in my own range of tastes. Either way, no matter how it turns out, please do be gentle. But without further ado, let's get right into it with Shakey Graves and his early October release of And the War Came. The Austin-based singer-songwriter first came to prominence with his brand of ultra stripped-back ramshackle folk rock on efforts like EP Donor Blues and the full-length Roll the Bones. For And the War Came, Alejandro Rose Garcia, as he's formally known, doesn't so much ditch that frame of mind as he does expand on his repertoire. While a lot of those rustically built folk tunes still come forth on tracks like Only Son and Call It Heaven, they are joined by the insanely catchy pop structure of Dearly Departed, featuring one of several vocal contributions from the insanely good Esme Patterson, the Graham Parsons-inflected countrified honey of big-time Nashville star, in which Garcia and Patterson could pass for the late Parsons and his duet partner Emmylou Harris, and the almost Jack White-lace blues of The Perfect Parts. It's the evolution one expects out of an artist a few releases in, and one that manages to be as compelling as it is foot-tappingly infectious. On this release, Garcia tempers his typical storytelling lyrics with references to his recent breakup, though instead of coming off as depressingly dark or deep, they're mostly biting at the offending hand or firmly tongue-in-cheek. Nothing about the new direction in production or style takes away from one of the best parts of what consists of Shakey Graves, and it makes And the War Came a pleasantly inviting and at times rather Dylan-esque look into the depths of one man's creative soul. It's not quite like when his Bobness went electric, but it is another deeply promising chapter in the career of Alejandro Rose Garcia, and one that doesn't hesitate to deviate and take a few left turns. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Next up on our list is the surprise of this group, namely the hip-hop duo Run the Jewels and their second collaborative album released at the end of October titled Run the Jewels 2. Consisting of chemistry-laden duo Killer Mike and LP, the two came together for the first Run the Jewels back in the middle of last year after some initial collaborating on each other's solo work. And while the first in this series was a breakthrough smash, Run the Jewels 2 comes along and absolutely dominates, brutalizes, and smashes the competition to bits. And while I'll be the first to say I barely dredged the surface of rap and hip-hop, and my knowledge is pretty limited, it doesn't take a savant of the genre to realize how absurdly talented these two are and how they absolutely just crush it from the first note. From songs like the anthemic intensity of Blockbuster Night Part 1 and Ballbuster Close Your Eyes to the racial outcry of the brilliant Early, RTJ2 mixes cocky rap swagger and heart-thumping beats with overarching themes on police brutality, religion, and overall inequality. Verses between Mike and Al hum, crackle, and spit with an intertwining manic energy that rips apart their targets without any remorse or any remote pause or second thought. And while I don't necessarily agree with some of the choices in lyrical narrative, the overwhelming sense of speaking out against oppression and overwhelming BS in this day and age is pretty much always a theme I can get behind. As Jeff Tweedy's son Spencer pointed out recently while reviewing this record, they're the modern face of protest, and I am A-okay with that. I, for one, could not agree more, because while there is a time for peace and a time for polite, very even-keeled discourse, there's also a time for hard, ferocious lyrical barbs straight out of the fiery depths of hellish resistance. Run the Jewels nails that beautifully here, and I easily give RTJ2 a 9.5 out of 10. And lastly, in this mini rapid-fire installment, we have Irish singer-songwriter Damien Rice and his 8 years in the making return to music with last week's release of My Favorite Faded Fantasy. Rice first broke through both in his native homeland as well as here across the pond with his 2002 debut smash Oh, featuring songs like The Blower's Daughter and Volcano, and followed this up with a less successful 9 4 years later. And while he's finally decided to ditch numbers and use full words for this album release title, the more noticeable aspect of Fantasy is just how much it sounds like Rice at his most completely on point. 8 years later, certainly a lot has changed for him, being 40 years old now and largely devoid of any part of the spotlight for so long, but in a way it feels like it hasn't. Rice again visits the well for completely organic arrangements of sparsely picked guitar, voluminous strings, tickling pianos, and percussion swells that come together in an almost conducted sense of synchronized breath. The title track bursts with these ever-growing swells and ebbs against Rice's angelic falsettos in a way that feels like he's breaking new ground, while songs like The Box and It Takes a Lot to Know a Man feels like he's at his classic best without being too corny or over the top about it. Add in the brilliance of lengthy barroom sing-along Trusty and True, along with the breathtaking Utter Heartache in true Damien Rice lyrical fashion of The Greatest Bastard, and you have an album that may only be 8 tracks, but contains a lengthy spider's web of delicate beauty layering each and every single moment. In a way, Damien Rice's retreat from the spotlight reminds me of Fiona Apple's own 7-year slowdown prior to releasing The Idler Wheel in 2012. You miss artists like this in the great field of absence when they possess such amazing lyrical presence and perspective, but often the more time the creative pool gets to simmer, the greater the result will be. That is most definitely the case here with Rice, and I give my favorite Faded Fantasy a highly deserved 9 out of 10. But that is it, and that is all for me here, guys, with this mini little rapid-fire review thing for Damien Rice with my favorite Faded Fantasy, Run the Jewels with Run the Jewels 2 for my unexpected surprise top pick of this year, I think, and Shakey Graves with And the War Came. I hope you enjoyed all 3 of my little reviews here, talking about some very different yet very similar things, and all around the usual stuff. Keep it here for a little bit more this week, and as always, keep it tuned here for much, much more still to come, guys, so stay tuned.